Hello, I'm Aloysius, and I'm the owner of Haunted Harbor Tours. And I exclusively, so far on this channel, have told nonfiction. Stories of nonfiction. And that's about to change. Today, I am telling a completely original, completely unique story that has been born in my head. I'm doing something new, I'm doing something original, and I'm doing something a little strange. I have a crippling disease it's a curse. It's a curse. It's called dyslexia, and it's fucking awful. And the worst part about dyslexia for me is the fact that I am a storyteller. I live for stories. I love telling them. I love hearing them. I love making them. I particularly love making them. Most of my thought goes into the creation of a good tale. But all my life I've been incapable of actually putting it to paper. Because of the dyslexia. Because I don't have the physical ability to put what is in my head through my fingers onto paper. I am incapable of writing a story, and that is my curse. And recently, for the last couple of months, I've been slamming my head into a brick wall trying to write a Gothic tale that I have just swimming around. And I realize I have YouTube. Typically, I use this channel for nonfiction. However, this is a Gothic fiction. This is the first in a line of short stories, all set in a single town. A place called Dark Chasm. This collection I'm going to call probably the Castle Raven. They're going to have a longer narrative that continue and tell the story of the city and the people who live in it. I'm basically doing a ghost tour for a fictional city with the story of Castle Raven. And with that, today is the first chapter of an ongoing fictional tale in a more fictional world. A world without the same hang-ups that we have here in this one. A world with polytheistic people. In the Middle Ages. For the sake of this story, we're going to deal with BC, before change, and AC, after change. And you'll understand what that change is, I'm sure, as the story goes. But with that, to properly introduce you to the story of Dark Chasm, we're not going to open with that city. Rather, I feel the best story to tell you, to introduce such a place, is the story of the witch hunter, Nicholas Hearn. Now, Nicholas Hearn is a man who has dedicated his entire existence to hunting what he has declared evil. And evil to him is anything frowned upon by his deity, Sarkin. Sarkin the Dominant. Anything that fits outside of this rigid, narrow perspective of what is lawful, what is good, what is obedient, must be destroyed. As a cleric knight of the dominant god Sarkin, Nicholas Hearn has dedicated his existence to hunting witches, slaying vampires, finding undead, zombies, the things that rise from the graves, and bringing their end. It was in a thick, wild forest where he first heard of Dark Chasm. This forest was filled with wild men with green, mossy hair. These wild men were more bestial, he thought was lawful. These men worshipped the animal, the beast. They hunted, they communicated with plant and stone, and they spoke of all things having souls, things that were offensive. These were all offensive to his god, Sarkin the Dominant. And he brought ruin to this wild forest community of green druids. But it was a green witch there, a wise woman, a healer, who he had captured, who had spoken of the Castle Raven. She was begging for his life, groveling at his feet. He had slaughtered so many already. Said to him, "Please, spare me. I will tell you where you can find a land ruled by vampires, ruled by a man who forsake his king and took the land for his own. A place that's corrupted with actual, legitimate evil. A place where a lord has twisted and turned into an undead creature. Anybody who enters who is trying to re-establish connection to that town, to that land ruled by this treasonous lord, vanishes, never to be seen. There is an evil there, a darkness, possibly even canoodling with things from the lower realms." Nicholas agrees to the hag's terms and allows her to tell him everything he needs to know. She speaks of a land called Dark Chasm in the mountain range that intersects the outskirts of the kingdom of Hergal. Near one of the tallest peaks of this mountain range, in the center of the range, in a deep valley that cuts into the mountains, is an ancient town called Dark Chasm. And atop these peaks there are mountains shaped like ravens, a murder of ravens. And there is the castle Raven, Lord Damien Dante Raven. A man who was once noble and good and obedient to King Hergal. But then, out of nowhere, the sun stopped rising. Blackness filled the sky. It's always night in Dark Chasm, and all communication has ceased. No one has heard a word of Dark Chasm for 45 years. This is 45 AC. So Nicholas Hearn heard this tale and then lit the Green Witch on fire. As she was tied to the stake, she begged, she pleaded, "But I sold you this information. I traded it for my life. How can you do this?" But he's a follower of Sirkin, the dominant. So he murdered the Green Witch and begins his long trek across several kingdoms to the kingdom of Hergal, and through and beyond. And as he can finally see the mountain range, he notices the roads become older, more poorly kept. Trees are fallen over, and he has to take time to either go around or break the wood so that he can move his horse and wagon along with him. He has a lot to travel with, you see. The tools of a witch hunter are many, and a lot of gunpowder must be carried. And as he gets to the mountainous range, the road is vanished. Avalanches and fallen rock, bramble and trees have grown over it, and he has to leave his horse and carry only what is necessary. And as he climbs this mountainous range, he hits a patch of the road where it still exists. You know, the cobblestone or the brick still remain, the various carved stone that make up this road. And ahead of him, he sees a priestess in red walking toward him. Now, this is a priestess he recognizes, a priestess of the Red Queen. Unlike the lesser gods, the bestial gods that he encountered and destroyed the followers of in that dark forest, he will not slay a priestess of the Red Queen. You do not anger a god as powerful as the Red Queen. Even a follower of Sirkin the Dominant knows that. And as she approaches, she stops and greets him with a mad look in her eye. She is tall and slender, her black hair down low beyond her shoulders. She obviously has no name. The priestesses of the Red Queen are nameless, but she's pale, dehydrated, a pained expression in her eyes. And she says to him, "You do not want to go any further. There is madness in these hills. There is a disease, suffering. You will be the wisest man in the world if you turn around. You do not want to experience the certain death that you have awaiting you if you continue up this mountain. Do not go. Do not continue. I'm a follower of Sirkin. It is my duty to destroy anything that does not obey the dominating will of Sirkin. We have lost many, stronger than you. If you continue up that trail, you will die." But Nicholas Hearn continues, ignores this priestess warning. Now, it is weeks traveling by foot along these mountains, up and down. Very little nourishment. Cold at night sometimes, depending on the altitude. The sky has slowly, over a period of time, vanished. No more blues, no more day, just darkness. Finally, standing atop another ridge, yet another after what feels like an endless amount, he sees the lamps and the lanterns and the oil streetlights of a town in a valley down below. And atop, he can almost make out the mountain range in this blackness and this darkness, in the faint glow through the thick gray clouds, in the very little amount of sunlight that peeks through. He can make out a castle atop raven-like mountains, a dark, spindly, Gothic, spire-laden castle. And he knows he's finally made it to Dark Chasm. And he travels down that mountain range, and suddenly the roads are fresh again, clean, healthy. There's farmland, and as he gets closer, he passes the Dawson family cemetery. It's marked in big letters, big ornate flourishes of what looks like fine hand script, but carved into stone atop a stone gate, the Dawson cemetery. And in that cemetery, he sees a strange man, large eyes and a long maul, a man in a white button-down shirt with overalls and tan slacks. He is digging into the ground, but at his hip are two long daggers. The man watches Nicholas Hearn pass this strange gravedigger, a Dawson perhaps, watches, and he almost seems to vanish as he's standing still, watching Nicholas. But Nicholas continues. Slowly, he passes parks and inns, and he continues along, now shops and storefronts. But as he walks, he notices something strange. The children playing in the street get one sight of him all the way off in the distance, and they run into their homes. And the mothers will close their shutters. And they react to him as though he's some sort of wretched, vile creature, the type that he hunts himself. They all look at him with fear. Those who walk out not knowing that he's approaching, they see him, they look in shock, and they hide themselves away. And he wonders, could this disease, this infection, have left the Castle Raven and infested the people as well? Now, this wouldn't fit what he knows of creatures he assumes them to be, but he's never seen a town 45 years into infection before. And he continues, he gets closer and closer, and in the main strip is a grand hotel, the Sunless Inn. It's Victorian and beautiful. Brick and stone architecture with wood frames. There's something twisted and beautiful about the structure. And strange and wonky, almost shiplap in nature. And he goes into this inn, and there's a woman sitting behind the desk. She's blonde, beautiful, in her late 40s. She's got hazel eyes and a kind smile. some crow's feet along her eyes. She is beautiful, the aged beauty of her beginning to poke through. Not yet a glorious crone, but older and wiser. A little more suffering than a youthful woman. And she scoffs at him when he walks in the door. She seems as though she's frustrated to have a visitor, a possible guest. And he says to her he would like to rent a room. He'll be here for a few days. He knows not how long. And she says, you don't want a room here. You want to turn around. You want to leave this town. But he insists. So she charges him a fair rate. And he drops his bags. He gets a bath. And it still being what he assumes to be daylight, he continues it over. Across the street he had seen a tavern. Another fine establishment, crafted, more expensive looking than the ones on the outskirts. This is the center of town. There's people in the streets, although they seem to be avoiding Nicholas, and about as much of a space between them as they pass, although there are enough that he begins to feel they're not necessarily avoidant of him any longer. The tavern's name hanging from a rocking iron sign. This town at one point used to be mines, gold, iron, silver. All kinds of wonderful metals used to come from these mountains. Sure, here, ore runs in veins. There, it's plentiful. And a single mountain could hold iron, zinc, nickel, gold. And that is exactly what the land of Dark Chasm sits upon. In this iron sign, it reads, "The Tired Lamb." A man with a lute is standing outside, strumming. And when he sees Nicholas Hearn walk up, he holds the door open and smiles at him. And Nicholas enters. The bard follows him shortly thereafter, and the two walk to the bar and sit at this bar. It's an empty bar, and Nicholas realizes this. He realizes he has no idea what time it is. The bar's completely empty, and he's been traveling for weeks through a mountain with a road that's decayed 45 years ago, or began decaying, hasn't been used in 45 years. His circadian rhythm is way off. Everybody else knows what time it is. Probably. They live in this town. They're used to not having sun. Nicholas doesn't know if he's walking into this bar 1 in the afternoon or 7 o'clock at night. He knows it's not happy hour because this place is empty. The bartender looks at him and says, "I would like to serve you your drink, get you something to eat, and then encourage you to leave. Just leave. Get out of here. You don't want to be in this town." And Bard's leading in next to the bartender listening to this, and he's just listening. You're just watching. And Nicholas Hearn says, "Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be here for a couple of days. It's a mighty beautiful castle up there." And the bard stands, walks away, begins, singing. A couple of people walk in. He's singing a song of threes. Threes become a consistent theme in all the songs that the bars sing for the rest of the night. 3 birds down, 3 times. Any song he has, the idea of 3 have been given is inherent in the song. But regardless of that, Nicholas doesn't understand, that the threes are saying that he's been given 3 warnings, that it's some kind of message to the town people that he's been warned 3 times. Instead, he's focused on getting information about the vampires in this castle. But the bartender, he seems completely unintent to answer any of Nicholas's questions, and instead hands him a list of drinks. And Nicholas notices that the drinks are strange. Finer than most. One drink titled the Cruel Elixir elixir is advertised as added extra hops. The bartender explains to him that, when normal beer would be, served and where it would expire, instead of allowing it to expire, they put in extra hops and they double cook it and they allow it an extra period. It makes a stronger, tastier, more hoppy and bitter tasting beer. A stout named after the lord up in the castle, the Lord Raven Stout, the blackest stout beer. They explain it's there's never been a stout as black and delicious as this one. Heck, they even have a fine wheat beer called the Vile Kindness. Local. All of them local. And he says, why? How do you have such fine beer? And they say, don't worry about that. Have any you want, they're on the house. Now, you will find also that our cattle, our meats, and our vegetables are going to be better than you've ever had before. I highly recommend the steak. You've had probably a long walk to get here, and, enjoy it. And, Nicholas, he hasn't had any of the beer yet. He's read this list. He's impressed by the list, but, it's been sitting in front of him. The bard walks up, takes a sip, and hands it back to him. Now, to Nicholas, the bard, it's he just seems like a drunk. But to Nicholas, this also means, well, it's safe. This bard drank it. So, he starts to drink and he starts to eat. And again, he asks, look, I've heard tale that this is a cursed place. You have a lord who sits in that throne who's wicked and evil, is turned to some sort of vampire. Is this true? And they say, yeah. He's been cursed for years. Something horrible happened. We don't know exactly what, but he is cursed. He drinks blood. Yeah, he drinks blood. Anybody whose blood is drank gives it willingly. Lord Damien Dante Raven is a man that we truly feel is the best leader we've ever had. We are truly happy with what he has done for us, and we would allow him to drink our blood. If we can't, they leave. And if we can, we do. But we give it willingly, Nicholas thinks. What about your sky? You haven't had sun in years. So, yeah, we haven't. Don't even remember what the sun looks like. But, the Lord has provided. The Lord of this land has made it so through magical means or whatever have you. The crop is always full and of the best quality. All of the food that we eat is of exceptional quality, as you can tell with that steak and all of the vegetables we've given you. It's delicious. The cows produce the best meat we've ever had since the change. Well, that's incredibly strange. And of course, in this bar now, it is filling up. People all seem to be chattering and drinking and carrying on. But Nicholas noticed eyes are on him a lot. The whole bar is staring at Nicholas Hearn. They're all drinking. They're all having a whispery kind of conversation. And then the door opens. The gravedigger he saw from before walks into the bar. As the gravedigger approaches and sits next to Nicholas Hearn, Nicholas can feel the goose pimples on his skin stand on end. He feels deeply unsettled and uncomfortable. This gravedigger is a strange, changed man. He notices first that strange, elongated maw, but it wasn't a maw. Looking at it now, the yellowing of the skin makes it look more like a fleshy beak. The man's arms are longer, more extended, the bones twisted. They have an arch to them, like a bird's wings. His hairs are long, black, thick, and they have little hairs coming off of the side. His eyes are big, black spots, no pupils, no irises. The bartender says, "Hey, welcome, Mr. Dawson. Can I get you a drink?" The gravedigger just shakes his head. He seems as though he's trying to speak. For a while, he hacks forward. It seems as though he's almost calling. The sounds coming out of his mouth are more bird-like than human. And eventually, after a cough, he finally gets the words out. He says, "No, I'm just here for the body." And smiles kindly at Nicholas. And Nicholas feels vindicated in this. Yes, I knew it. There are bodies. There are twisted things, right? This isn't as peachy as you've been telling me, bartender. There are horrors happening here. And this is proof. Where's the body? Show me the body. And the bartender says, "Well, it's not a body yet." The bar is completely silent now. All eyes are on the conversation happening. And the bartender says, "We are incredibly loyal to Lord Damien Dante Raven and what he's done. We weren't always, but we are now. What he has given us is better than any king, queen, ruler we've had in the past, and he was always a good ruler when he was alive, and he is incredible now. The food is delicious, the beer is fantastic, people live longer. We're all just happier under this vampire lord. Sure, we sacrifice things like the sun, but always there's somebody trying to bring back something. Somebody seeking their agenda, their control. Kings arriving with armies, tax collectors, you name it. There's always somebody who's coming in and trying to disturb our way of life. Lord Damien Dante Raven is a busy man. And he doesn't have time to deal with the people representing silly, stupid, fucking controlling gods. And so we handle it. We give them 3 warnings, and if they refuse all 3 warnings, which every single one of them have, we handle it. And that's when Nicholas Hearn feels the first knife just go in, stab right into his abdomen. And he looks over, and the old bard is holding this knife. He twists it so that he feels the shooting, tearing pain of his stabbed flesh actually ripping now as the knife twists. Next, coming from an old lady. And all around him, suddenly he's just loaded up with these knives. Nicholas Hearn's last words are a question. Are all of you vampires? And they say, no, none of us are. We're loyal. Nicholas Hearn now rests in an unmarked grave among tax collectors, surveyors, diplomats, whatever have you. All unmarked graves in the Dawson Cemetery. Anyway, you made it to the end. There will be more. I plan to do the story of the Dawson Cemetery. It's going to be the story of about 100 years in the cemetery. Subscribe, please. You could comment. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this very strange for me experiment in literature and writing. This was all stream of consciousness. I made it up as I went. I had notes. Tell me what you thought. I hope you enjoyed it. You could also, come to Annapolis at some point. Take a ghost tour with me. I know for a fact the next thing I'm going to be putting up is the Goyetta tarot card review. I plan to tell the story of the Black Pelican, and so I got a lot of cool content coming up, so subscribe. And with that, thank you so much.